evening, everyone. Welcome to the City Council Redevelopment Agency meeting of Monday, January 24th. I'd like to take a minute and ask you to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on our agenda tonight is changes to the order of the agenda. Staff have any changes to the order?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any of my fellow council members, any changes? No? Anyone from the public here? All right. Report from closed session. We had a closed session regarding labor negotiations. No decision was rendered, but direction was given to staff. Next item is council reports. First item, Mike, do you want to speak very briefly about South County Fire? And
yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to bring to the attention of our fellow council members. We had a fire board meeting, I believe it was last week, and Chief Loudon made a presentation of which I believe each of you have received a copy. Rather than me make that presentation, basically what the chief outlined was what options we have available and what he is going to proceed. The board instructed him to proceed forward with all efforts in consolidation. Rather than me recount what we talked about, I've asked if as my report that we hear specifically directly from the chief what he reported to us. You have a copy of the actual documents that was presented. So Chief Loudon, if you could come forward and identify yourself and tell them this is our report.
Am I on?
You're on.
You're on.
Well, good evening. I should start out by just asking if anybody has any questions. That would make this thing very, very quick and short. But I will give a brief overview if you'll indulge me. Really, there are still a wide variety of options dealing with South County Fire and the future of South County Fire services that are being provided to the cities of San Carlos, Belmont, and the Harbor Industrial Area. Realistically, they take a couple different forms. One is for South County Fire, either in whole or in its separate parts, to contract or merge with another agency, either a single agency or individual agencies in San Mateo County. But I guess we could go outside of San Mateo County, but primarily would be looking at neighbors to assist in providing that service. One of the other alternatives that I talked with the board about last week was that South County Fire partners, the joint powers partners, the city of Belmont and the city of San Carlos, should sit down, review whether or not there are resolutions to the various issues and perceptions of, I believe, unbalanced treatment or unbalanced expenses between the two partners, to see if there's any interest in addressing those issues between the partners and perhaps looking forward to restructuring South County Fire Authority as it is currently set. In the meantime, I did recommend that South County Fire and I be authorized to move ahead with the individual partners, both the City of San Carlos as well as the Belmont Fire Protection District, to look at additional partnerships, to look at working with other agencies in the area, to see which agencies are a good fit and which agencies have interest in dealing with South County Fire and providing that service to the community. In light of that, the board authorized me to assist both the Belmont Fire Protection District and independently the City of San Carlos, as well as my role as fire chief with South County Fire Authority, I guess sort of representing all three different entities in considerations of future services, fire protection services for the community. I will be setting up meetings with both city managers from the city of Belmont and the city of San Carlos, with neighboring agencies as the interest is determined. I would expect those to start over the next couple of weeks. You can appreciate some of the difficulty scheduling the city managers' calendars as well as the fire chief's calendars in each one of these agencies. So I have started on that, and I would expect to start these meetings next week. The other thing I think of note, I would fully expect to be back with the South County Fire Protection Authority's board this summer with a recommendation for an appropriate partner. With that decision from the board, or with a decision then by the board on which direction to move, I would hope to be operational with whatever the South County Fire Authority looks like by January 1st of next year. It was suggested to me that was rather fast, but realistically, once the decision is made, I believe we can move ahead fairly quickly and get resolution that will, I think, take away some of the anxiety of the community as well as the employees of South County Fire and resolve some of the concerns for the future. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that the council may have.
Other questions for the chief?
Let me clear up a couple of things that the Chief brought up. Number one, the reason he asked for authorization from the board to negotiate with the two cities is that the Chief is on a contract with us for a one-year basis, and that contract is with South County Fire, and the Belmont folks wanted the right to negotiate separately. Number two, as the Chief pointed out, he is asked the input from the board, and the representation that Mr. Eaton and I made to him was that it would be our request that the Chief negotiate South County Fire as one entity, and that it go together as one whole and it be taken as one entire entity. Belmont did indicate, they didn't disagree, but they did indicate that they were going to pursue their own efforts. Third point, and I'll turn it back over to the Chief then, or to any of you for questions, is that the entity, the South County Fire, stays in effect for this 18-month period.
Correct.
And so the time frame that the Chief was hired under, 1 year, and charged with in his contract to find a partner, is all within that 1 year period. So our notice a couple of meetings ago, when we put on notice that we want the disillusionment to stay on equal ground, is still bound under the terms of the original 18-month contract. So if the Chief does it, it'll be outside that agreement, come back to the board and say, would you agree to split? So it was our, Mr. Eaton and myself, request that he negotiate South County Fire as one entity. And if that doesn't work, and finally, we also set up some meetings with Redwood City. So the mayor and I had a meeting with Redwood City, and they're prepared to start these negotiations. So the Chief is correct in that moving as quickly as you can. Huh?
It's my hope, if I may, it's my hope that whatever decision is made by the South County Fire Board is shared then by the City Council of San Carlos as well as the Belmont Fire Protection District. So the time frame really is to be determined mutually if it's other than the 18-month period notice that was given.
Questions?
Will there be any further discussions with Belmont in terms of an attempt to resolve the differences?
Yes. The Chief indicated that the issue he was talking about, there were two issues. One issue is one of the fire commissioners from Belmont felt that South County Fire provides more fire protection to San Carlos. It's a 50-50 deal.
All right.
So it's a bottoms up. They bill the cost, split the cost 50-50. Since we have larger population, 28 versus 26, and secondly, that we have more industrial than they have, that de facto we're getting more fire protection district. Well, I think a study was done. You go back and look at the actual fires. You go back and look at the actual calls as to who's, so we said, well, we did offer in the discussion, fine, if you want to split it 50-50, we'd be happy to, 60-40, 55-45, but then the vote would go that way. So that quickly ended that discussion. And then the second issue is we have brought up the issue at prior budgetary meetings about the cost of the services provided, and we wanted an evaluation, and that was declined. And I'll tell all of you that one of the reasons is that it's a 2-2 vote. I mean, we're stymied. We want, if Don and I want to ask, we wanted an RFP for the HR and the finance, and Belmont doesn't want it because it's about $230,000 per year to staff and pay HR and financing for about 46 employees. So I thought it was kind of steep. Chief?
Other questions? Mike, I just actually had a question for clarification, really. You stated that, I know Chuck said that they're looking to have something in place by January of next year, yet the agreement under the JPA extends until June 30th of next year. What I thought you said was that you had hoped that the two partners would be able to agree that between January and June, that essentially we dissolve the agreement or modify the agreement so that both parties would be out of it as of January. No? No. So help me understand, contractually under the JPA, I know that we're partnered with Belmont Fire Protection District through the end of June of next year.
The JPA makes provision for an 18-month notice prior to the start of the calendar year. So you're right, it would be, the dissolution would take effect June 30th of 2006. The issue is that if both partners agree on a different date, whether that be prior to the June 30th or after the June 30th date, that agreement between the two partners would take precedence. So my expectation is that if we put a package together that is suitable for both the City of San Carlos and the Belmont Fire Protection District, that both of those partners would then agree to modify the specific date of expiration of the Joint Powers Authority.
And since we have a single point of contact, which is yourself acting as facilitator, you would obviously manage the process so that there would be a go-live date, if you will, operationally when both parties could be out of it.
Absolutely.
Assuming that that would be the direction that it went.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have a question.
Matt has a question. Yeah.
So one of the possibilities, or what you're suggesting, is because Belmont is wanting to also go it alone, in addition to, I think, allow South County Fire to go out and negotiate for another partner. Am I to understand there could be the possibility that Belmont finds its own partner on its own, and then South County Fire finds a partner, and then at that point, South County Fire, although still called South County Fire as an agency, takes in another agency or partners with another agency, remains to be called South County Fire, but Belmont is not part of it because they've gone off on their own.
You know, I would suggest that almost anything in this scenario is possible. My expectation along those lines, South County Fire is made up of the two partners. South County Fire is the Belmont Fire Protection District along with the City of San Carlos. If Belmont Fire Protection District decided to go independently to a separate partner from the City of San Carlos, I don't believe there would be any more South County Fire. There wouldn't be a need for the organizational structure. There certainly wouldn't be a need for the movement of money between the agencies to then offset cost. I think operationally some of the same kind of things could happen. I mean, San Carlos could continue with the South County Fire name together with another agency if that were a scenario. San Carlos could also find a partner independently of the City of Belmont and go with a separate agency from the City of Belmont. My preference, quite honestly, with everybody here and with the public, is that if I can, I would like to see the entire workforce go with the same agency. It may well be under separate contracts so that both the Belmont Fire Protection District and the City of San Carlos had absolute control over the agreement they have with whoever's providing the service. But certainly does not preclude them from going with the same agency to provide that service.
And one more question. When you started off by saying something to the effect about both agencies being San Carlos and Belmont sit down and look at the possibility of resolution of differences, are you suggesting that the two city councils meet, or are you just saying that our representatives, as it were, Don and Mike on our side and Dave and Cora Lynn on the other, meet and still work out, see if there's any resolution of differences that's possible?
You know, I'm suggesting that if there is interest, that perhaps both the City Council give direction to the board members representing the City Council, and the Fire Protection District give direction to the board members representing the district. I think it might be cumbersome to have both bodies at large meeting to try to work out these issues. I think the board members have all been part of South County Fire Protection District's or Fire Authority's governance for the past few years, and are probably more familiar with the issues than the general membership of the council or the Fire Protection District Board.
Okay, thank you.
We have discussed this before, if, to have either different parties or bring all the council together. Where we are now is allow the chief, I'll go back a little bit in history. We hired this gentleman to come here to do this very job. We're saying let him do his job. Now, he may come back with 2 separate agreements. He may come back with 1 agreement. He may come back, Belmont Fire Protection, it's Belmont Fire Protection District, it's not the City Council. So the Fire Protection District may come back with their own deal, and they would come to us and say, we want to split. And remind this board, we have hired and engaged an attorney who has some extensive experience with the disillusionment of joint powers, and that is Ms. Casman. We met her here a couple of meetings ago. So I guess what we're trying to do now is let's let them go find partners, let them go find a deal, and then come back. And if it requires us getting the 2 councils together, I'll tell you, I'll be the first person to say let's all sit down in a room, all 10 of us. But I agree with the chief. Let's get a deal first and see if we can hammer it out. Let him do that job, and then come back and let the board, if it's intransigent and can't find it, kick it up to the 2 councils. But I'd say let's give them enough time to find a partner.
Yeah, Matt, I would also, I would echo Mike's comments, but I would also add, it's not just as easy as going out and saying, hey, let's partner with, another agency. They're looking at funding, they're looking at their costs. Ideally, there's got to be some cost savings in order for it to make an attractive partnership for another agency. They're not going to take on South County Fire or the San Carlos portion of South County Fire just because, they're going to be nice guys. And what I think Mike and I found in talking with Jeff Ira is, the chiefs can work it out operationally. I think that they've trained together, they've worked together, they cover each other's shifts when they get called to a large fire. I mean, operationally, the fire departments, I think, all work very closely together. So that's not the issue. The issue is really what are the incentives to another agency to partner with San Carlos or South County Fire, and what are the impacts to San Carlos? We may end up finding out that, we're going to end up paying more money by being out of South County Fire than we have been, but at least it will be less than trying to run our own fire department here in San Carlos, which, I don't think anyone wants to do. The move really is going to be more towards consolidations. So I think the chief needs to go forward. It's the city managers that need to be discussing the dollars and cents portion of it. I think the fire chiefs need to be discussing the operational aspects. And I think that at some point, just as it's going to come before this council to approve some future agreement with another agency, it's got to come to another council potentially for them to approve it as well. So just exploring the political will and acceptance is of value as well. So if you are talking to other council members, feel free to bring it up and say, would you be in support of some fire consolidation just from a policy standpoint? So, but in terms of getting the 2 councils together, by that point, I don't know that what it would be that we would discuss that hadn't already been discussed.
I'm not asking the question because I'm being a proponent of some idea. I'm asking the question because I simply wanted to know from the chief what he meant by his statement when he said the 2 agencies sit down and look at the possibility of resolution for the differences. That's all I wanted to know. And he very clearly stated his point, and I appreciate it. All the things that you said about, the pros and the cons and the costs, very aware of that. And, I know that it's if we go contract with another agency, what that agency is going to be looking at is, does it make sense for them? They're not going to allow themselves to be hurt by taking on us as an agency that's contracting to them. I know that very well, and it's
Okay.
part of the
Madam
deal.
Mayor, I'd like to make one more suggestion that Chief, I'd ask is that after we give a report every third, keep you up to date after every meeting. all right? So that, I mean, this is important
Yeah,
that
it is.
you
I agree
kind
with
of
you.
find out where we are.
Well, how about if we give some discretion? I mean, if, just because you have a meeting, if there's nothing really of
If another
interest to
report.
report, I
Well,
mean,
another
just
report, then I'll come back and say
report
there's another
back with
report.
substantive changes.
But I'm going to ask that the chief be available, because a lot of times this is a complicated issue, and sometimes Commissioners Eaton and I might not give you the detail that the chief may have. So with your permission, the council's permission, when we give this report, and there is something to report, I'm going to ask the chief to join me. Okay?
Okay.
All right?
Very good.
Thanks.
All right, other council reports. Mike, did you have anything else? Tom?
Just I mentioned that we met as the Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance, and it's interesting to note that the shuttles around the county are starting to pick up a bit in terms of patronage. The economy's turning a bit for some companies, and so it's good to see the ridership improve. We're also planning a workshop. We're planning for a planning workshop at the March meeting, so that will, it's an annual event where we determine the future course for the coming 12 months. And then as a second item, I just want to mention to the group here in the audience, as well as the folks at home, that the Lions Club has a few extra tickets for the crab feed this Friday, and or Saturday. Saturday.
It's a chili cook-off on Friday.
That's right. Crab feed is on Saturday. Tickets are available, and so if you would like one, please give me a call. We'll put them in roll call, and you'll have the time of your life with more than enough to eat. Thank you.
Tom, do you want to let us know how much the tickets
I
are
think they're $35.
for all-you-can-eat crab?
30.
That's $30,
We'll
okay.
make a special deal tonight. It's $30.
Thank you for that report. Matt?
Just very quickly, had a meeting with Don and I serve on the building ad hoc that's looking at some issues with building department and so forth. And we had a meeting with the Loreola Neighborhood Association. It was very successful as far as getting feedback from the neighborhood about what the issues are there. Primarily, the thing that we were looking at and talking to them about were carports, garage conversions becoming anything from family rooms to second dwellings to bedrooms and so forth, and then also talking about the second units that are in the backyard and that sort of issue there. So it was a very good meeting. We got a lot of feedback from the residents. I did a follow-up email to staff giving a report on what we heard and so forth. I think the rest of the council probably may have. I don't know if you've got that or not. Yeah. And then I just wanted to add a sort of an editorial comment to it all. I did see the article on that the Daily News did. They're doing the series on the mayors, and they talked to Inga, and she mentioned about us as council members getting out into the public more and meeting with folks. And I think this meeting is an example of how getting out and meeting folks and talking to them can be very, very valuable. And so I want to echo or give a thumbs up to your comments about us getting out and meeting with folks, whether it's at the market, as you suggested, or special sidewalk meetings or anything like that is a good thing.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Matt. I just have two items. First, I wanted to report that the city manager, Mike Garvey, and I attended the League of California Cities, Mayors, and New Council Members Institute up in Sacramento last week. I will be not boring my council members with the details of the actual conference specifics, but I will put together a memo and forward it to you with just some of the things that we did learn during that. We covered everything from financing to ethics to current legislation to communication, things like that. So I'll go ahead and put that together.
That explains these gifts you brought us.
Which explains, yes, I did feel like I ought to bring back something to the council. So I did pass out this Mayor's and Council Members Resource Guide from 2005, a little light bedtime reading, as well as the Institute for Local Self-Government actually puts together a wonderful handbook which is called Everyday Ethics for Local Officials, and it covers such topics as sort of being a public official in the public eye, decision-making issues, at meetings, how to conduct oneself. Not that we don't always already know this, but I think it sometimes is a good reminder, and it's a good resource. Again, if you're not interested, or if you read through it and find that you want to recycle it, please do so through the city manager's office. And then that way, depending on the outcome of November's election, we may have new faces on this dais and gives them a jump start. The other thing I wanted to report is at that meeting, I did have the opportunity to sit down with our State Senator Joe Simidian, as well as independently Assemblyman Ira Ruskin and Assemblyman Gene Mullen, and was fortunate enough to actually get about an hour with each one of them, one-on-one, just talking about some of the issues that we have here in San Mateo County, and got from them a commitment to stay open and to work with San Carlos to try to resolve some of the current issues, especially in the areas of financing and legislation, supporting some of the things that we're trying to do here. So that was, I thought, very positive. I tried to get in with the governor, but he was out of the area. The other item I have under council reports is, as I think we've probably read in the local paper, Supervisors Rich Gordon and I'm trying to remember else, Mark Church? Mark Church are actually looking at a proposal that the legislature be asked to rewrite the statute governing the Samtrans board appointment process. And this is the controversy that has arisen over the fact that Daly City seems to have so much representation on the Samtrans board. I plan to write a letter to Rich Gordon asking him to reconsider that request on the basis of I don't know that we want to have the state really looking at governing a local county affair or local county board. So if the council feels like this is something that we should do as a council, take a position as a council, please let me know and we can agendize it for a future council, or if you have questions about that. But in the meantime, as mayor, I'm planning to send a letter on my behalf, and I know Mike King also had indicated some interest in joining me as an individual, not necessarily stay in the position of this council. Okay? Okay. That's it under council reports. Oh yeah, okay. The next item, public comment. We've set aside 10 minutes at this point to hear from people that wish to address the City Council on items not on the posted agenda. Each speaker would be limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience at this time who wishes to address the Council on an item not on the posted agenda? Okay. Moving on. Next item, approval of consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request that specific items be removed for a separate action. Any of my council members would like to remove an item?
F.
Item F. Anyone from staff have anything to be removed?
No, Madam Mayor.
And any member of the public wish to remove an item? Okay. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent calendar items 6A through E and G through I, including D, which is an authorization of the amendment to the contract between the City of San Carlos and the Board of Administration of Public Employees Retirement System.
So that would be adoption of ordinance 1344.
I'm sorry, 1344.
Second.
Before we take the vote, Mike, did you want to note that we took action?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Just the one item that is not included in the PERS issue is that the effective date of that would be June the 27th of 2005.
As amended.
Okay. And the second, as amended? All right.
Thank you.
Call the question, please.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton is absent. Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty?
Yes. Consent calendar 6F, which is a resolution authorizing adjustments to the parking fines. Matt, did you have questions?
Yeah, I had one question. I think the Chief's here. I was taking a look at what we're trying to do in this resolution and adjust all these the parking fines to pretty much a county average. The thought occurred to me, and I actually went through here and counted how many there are. There are 31, and it seemed cumbersome in the sense that each are a different amount. And so the thought that occurred was, what if they were just all at $30, which is kind of the average of them all, and it would make it so much more simple in that a traffic officer never has a question about what a parking fine is going to be. He doesn't have to get out his little book, or he or she doesn't have to get out his book and look up and see how much they are. And the other thing I noticed is if you add these all up for what is recommended, not that they're all, we're going to have one each every year, but if you add them all up, it comes out to $873. If you just take 31 times 30, you come up with $930. So you have a little bit of advantage there, possibly in a fee structure. But primarily what I was looking at is, why have something that is so cumbersome where an officer has to remember, okay, this is this kind of fine and how much it's going to be, just all around from the officer through the whole administration of the police department. It seems like it would be so much simpler if it was just a flat fee, $30. So, just a question.
Chief, would you like to just state your name also so that...
Yes,
people know
I'm
who you
Floyd
are?
Sanderson. I'm your interim police chief. Quite frankly, the reason for the difference in them has to do primarily, I believe, for the difference in the severity of it, perhaps more than anything else. And as to the officers remembering them, they really don't have to, because they're all listed on the citation. The amount of the fine is on the citation, so they don't really have to remember it. And quite frankly, I think your suggestion has some merit. We didn't think about it. We just kind of followed what we had, and it looked like the right kind of thing to do. I have to tell you, your idea is as good as ours.
Well, to me, it's a similar thing I saw one time when we were looking at, it's something else that had fees, and there were fees that had 50 cents here and $2 there, like $52. And my suggestion to staff at that time, I think we were talking with Richard, just round everything to a $25 figure, or so everything adds up with fives or zeros, and there's no change involved, and just to simplify things. And I think we did adopt that, and it just trickles down through everything that staff does. When you're running the little calculator or whatever, you don't have to worry about the cents, and I don't know.
Matt, can I throw something
Yeah,
out there
sure.
just
Go ahead.
as an option? I mean, I was looking through these, and the ones that are down at $22 are probably the ones that people get most often, like the employee permits. Parking in the lots without a permit. I would imagine you get quite a few of those. You raise it from $22, well, actually, currently $16 to $30. I think you're going to have a lot of citizens screaming. The same thing with, I think OT, 1 hour means...
Those are all overtime parking.
Yeah, so you miss you're in a parking spot for 2 hours and 5 minutes, and it's 2 hours, and instead of being dinged $22, it's $30. And, so if we're going to look at kind of just equalizing everything, yes, it would make it probably quite easy from the standpoint of not having to take out your calculator, although I'm not quite sure that's how it's done, but that the severity thing, I think we really need to consider the severity as well as the frequency.
That was my first comment, Madam Mayor, regarding the reason for the separation is having to do with the severity of the offense. They're different.
Well, and also the frequency, because, if we're trying to make our downtown a place where people can come in and shop, we don't want to scare them away with $30 parking tickets when the average in the county is $22. They're going to go to Redwood City, they're going to go someplace else. So, while I think the idea probably has merit just seen from the standpoint of ease of giving tickets, as the overall impact for the community, I would be very hesitant to support a one price for or one fine for every offense. Did you have other questions?
Well, again, it's just a comment that I think goes through the whole system at City Hall, is anytime you can set up fees, charges that you have, where you're either ending in a 5 or a 0 and no change, again, that trickles through everybody's job, because when they're adding this stuff up and so forth, it makes the numbers so much easier.
Okay.
So that's my only
Okay.
closing comment on that. Leave it as is, I suppose, if we want, but it's just a thought.
I had two other questions, actually two questions. Mike, did you have any questions? My first question has to do with on average, when you go through this list, you go from our current price to the county average, and then there's a column for the recommended.
Yes.
And in almost all cases, they match, except for the fourth item down, which is double parked through the repair on street item. And those, for some reason, don't correlate to the county average, but they are $4 above the county average. Is there a reason for the difference there?
Only this, Madam Mayor, and that is that in San Carlos, those are a little bit more difficult. We have a few more problems with them, and they have always been a little higher in San Carlos. However, one of those down has to do with display for sale. You'll be hearing about that one later.
That was my second question.
We'll hear
Actually,
about that
because this is a resolution, do we need to strike that line item? Or would, if we adopted or introduced and adopted an ordinance, then that line item would be
That
cleaned
will
up?
automatically go away.
Okay.
Just won't be applied.
Sorry?
It
It
would-
simply won't be applied.
That's
ever.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so if there's no further questions,
I would move approval of consent calendar item 6F.
it's 5F.
Is it 5F? It is 5F. There's a little 6F in here, but okay, 5F.
Okay, the motion by Matt Grocott, seconded
King.
by King. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
You were a
Tom.
little too late, Tom.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Eaton is absent. Mayor Teagle Doherty.
Yes. Next item on our agenda this evening is, first item under new business. It's an introduction of an ordinance amending the San Carlos Municipal Code, Section 10.04.020, parking enforcement, and the section related to holiday schedules. Bob Lanzone?
Yes, Madam Mayor and council members. We're going to be doing a couple of things with parking tonight. And I would just indicate on the last item that you may pass a resolution. Those are recommendations. That is actually a bail schedule that is approved by the traffic commissioner at the court. So it's got to be approved by the court. So in a way, it's better to keep it in line with the other county items and not too far out of line. But moving on now, since we just passed the holiday season, it came to our attention through the police department that we have parking signs that say, parking on a holiday is accepted from many of the no parking or restricted parking areas. And our ordinance, which was adopted way back in 1976, calls out some strange dates, February 12th, February 22nd, 30th of May, trying, I think, to hit days that are President's Day and Memorial Day, things like that, instead of simply going with what actually our police department follows now as a matter of custom, which is the state list of holidays. So what we're proposing is to delete our current ordinance and adopt by reference Section 6700 of the Government Code, so that the holidays that are recognized at the state level will be the holidays that are followed by our police department in exempting persons from parking restrictions. Be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Bob, I just have a really quick one. One of the government codes says that a holiday is Good Friday from 12 noon until 3 p.m.
That's the way it is at the state. That's what the state recognizes.
Okay.
That's in the Government Code.
Are there any questions? No discussion? Someone would like to make a motion to introduce ordinance number
1353.
1353?
I'll move introduction of ordinance 1353, an ordinance of the City of San Carlos amending the San Carlos Municipal Code, Title 10, Parking Enforcement on Holidays.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Christine?
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty.
Yes. Next item is item 7B. It's an introduction of an ordinance amending the San Carlos Municipal Code, Section 10.32.380A, relating to the parking of vehicles for sale purposes within the City of San Carlos. Bob?
Right, we've all seen cars parked around town, sometimes in a line with for sale signs. And over the years, we've had an ordinance that says you're not allowed to park your vehicle on a roadway for the principal purpose of displaying the vehicle for sale or with a for sale sign. Unfortunately, and I say that sincerely because I don't think anybody likes to see the cars parked there and taking up either parking space or just the appearance of them. There have been a couple of court cases that have rendered our municipal code section and those in other cities like it invalid. The issue, even though the courts recognize a substantial government purpose in aesthetics, in perhaps public safety, the courts say that commercial speech is protected. It's protected under the First Amendment just the way it would be if you had signs in your car for vote for such and such a candidate or whatever your principle may be. The court indicates that restricting vehicles in this manner is taking a, quote, meat cleaver approach where a scalpel is required for these governmental purposes. If this is a spot where people shouldn't be parking or should be parking for just a short period of time, then the courts say we have a remedy. The remedy is to otherwise restrict parking. If for some reason the person has gotten out of control with balloons and large signs on the car for sale, then we have a signed ordinance which we could modify for commercial speech in a time, place, and manner that wouldn't be too broad, and we can restrict things in that way. I and you also received an email from a citizen today, again talking about traffic safety and aesthetics, and I think I've addressed those issues as they've been talked about with the court. There was mention of also the need for environmental review and environmental impact report for this ordinance. That goes way beyond what is required. CEQA actually has a categorical exemption for this type of ordinance, which would address existing highways and streets, and you're adopting regulations for operations, maintenance, permitting for those streets, as this is related to parking. So, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
The questions for Bob? Tom?
So we have a 72-hour limit.
Yes.
So theoretically, we post our for sale sign, park it 72 hours, and move it a block, and keep going around town until the car gets sold. So is there anything that would allow us to come between?
I can ask the chief how far someone has to move a car in the 72 hours. I think it's about 30 or 40 feet.
That's the best of my recollection.
Right. That's, as a practical matter, what we recognize. So sure, if you park it on one block, it doesn't sell for 72 hours. You get in the car, put it on another block, you can just keep it out there until it gets sold. Or it might be faster to go on eBay or Craigslist and reach a broader audience as well.
Actually, I have a question to the chief, if I may just ask a following question to that. My understanding is that they could park a car for sale, but the police won't tag it under the 72-hour rule unless someone calls and complains about it. Is that correct?
That would generally be true. The 72-hour rule primarily has been heretofore dealt with for abandoned vehicles. Now, it is not to say that that could not be interpreted to do it as the city attorney has suggested, but we generally and typically deal with those upon complaint.
So
that may influence the question.
A side question, Bob, would be regarding the Caltrain parking lot. It costs me $1.50 to park a day, and I park facing El Camino, and I have to move it. I mean, and I have to pay for it, but it's quite a nice billboard. Can the agency forbid parking with for sale signs in their lot? I know it's not a city question, but do you?
That's right. I think I'll leave that to David Miller, the attorney for Samtrans.
Okay.
I actually think they would have trouble also because it's commercial speech. It would be the same thing as if I had a sign for so-and-so for county supervisor, city attorney, city council. in the window as well.
Okay?
But,
Mike? Well, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Mike was...
I have one question, is that on the last, Bob, on the last item, fourth question, on the staff, in your memo, it says, because the ordinance was not tailored in a way which was sufficiently narrow, is there a way to broaden the language to reach some constitutionality, or not?
I don't think you can go to the content of the sign for sale. Again, if we have some reason we wanted to regulate the size of the signs, that kind of thing, flashing signs, those might be a certain type of distraction. We could regulate the type of sign. Just the way, this goes back to the Linmark case was one of the first cases that addressed commercial speech, and in this manner, that's where you put for sale signs on the front lawn. I mean, we all accept that now. But there was a time when many communities forbade for sale signs on the front lawn of the property. And it was that case that went up to the Supreme Court, and they said, it's protected commercial speech. You should be able to do that. Now, you could regulate the size of that sign, perhaps...
In other words, we could put it in the sign ordinance, my point, what I was asking.
If it was necessary.
Okay.
And really, what appears to be the nuisance that we all, I think, feel is they're all parked in a row along El Camino. And there's a certain element of lack of aesthetics and whatnot from having that.
Well, there's other ways of getting at the ones parked along El Camino, like street sweeping or no overnight parking like we have on Old County Road. I mean, there's different ways of spot addressing potentially problem areas. Matt, did you have a question?
Well, that's my question, is Tom's brought up a thing about the 72-hour rule, and that brought out the policy of the police, which is not, if there's a complaint, yes, we'll tag it, and that's when the tagging starts. Mike has hit on the idea of sign ordinance. So that's none of those things are on our agenda on this item to take action on any of those things. But I guess one thing we could do as a council, if we're so interested, is direct staff to look at this issue and come up with some recommendations. And we do what we do tonight, what we have to do with this. But we want to give direction to staff to look at this issue so that we don't have a nuisance of signs and especially overt signs, too large of signs, balloons, etc. As Bob suggests.
Well, I will pose the question to my councilman. I mean, do we really think that by changing this ordinance, we're opening Pandora's box and we're going to get a proliferation of people from San Jose to San Francisco all bringing their cars to San Carlos and parking them here because it's a used car on the street mecca? First, I don't think it's a problem.
I'll answer no for me. But all I ask is, and Matt, I agree with your point, but I'd rather not have the city attorney off in some, wild goose chase. Just explore the law. Can we find a something that is enforceable? Because we've heard the police side, and I'm not even sure that the sign side would work, but I think we're all after the same thing Tom brought up, and that is the Samtrans. You buy a ticket there, you paid the parking, you can put whatever you want in the window. It'd be tough for us to enforce that. But I mean, if rather than make a big deal out of it, I'm just saying, is there some way we can broaden? Because that's what you said. It already says the court found that the city could advance its interest in health and safety and aesthetics with measures far short of the outright prohibition.
My suggestion would be that we be reactive to this. If we see a problem in the future, I mean, we can move to enact a regulation that would address it as a long-range problem if we saw that. And I just point out that other communities now have the same situation with respect to for sale. So it's not as if they're all going to be coming here. They're just allowed every place. That's
well, and one last point of clarification. I mean, this specifically talks to vehicles parked on city streets, roadways. So even by changing this, we're not affecting it. Samtrans is private property. I mean, it wouldn't right now someone could park a car in their driveway for as long as they want. Well, in El Camino is a state highway. So, I think that if we look at very specifically what this is doing, or doing that it shouldn't be doing, we should keep our comments focused on that. Okay, Matt, sorry. Did you have-
Actually, it was covered. You've covered.
Okay. All right, so with that, is there anyone here from the audience that wishes to speak on this item? Okay.
I move to introduce ordinance number 1354, an ordinance of the City of San Carlos amending the San Carlos Municipal Code deleting item 10.3.2.380A, parking for sale purposes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Christine?
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty?
Yes. Okay. Moving along, the next item is a public hearing. It's a public hearing for the appeal of a planning commission's denial of a conditional use permit for an instructional facility at 638 El Camino Real. And for my fellow council members and for the record, I did receive a packet, as I'm sure all of you did, from the applicant. I did give staff a copy of this so that it would become part of the public record earlier in the week, so it is part of the public record. And with that, I'll turn it over to Liz Cullinan to focus our projector and do staff report.
Thank you, Mayor Teagle Doherty, members of the council. To give it just a minute.
Actually, maybe while you're talking, maybe Brian can focus it for you, just in the interest of time.
Thank you for your patience. As you've indicated, we have an application, a request in from the applicant to overturn the Planning Commission's denial of a conditional use permit for an instructional facility known as Fitwise for Kids at 630 El Camino Real. I'll provide you just a brief background on this item. First, there was a pre-application submittal in October of last year where the staff reviewed the application prior to submittal of a formal application, and the staff concluded that there were parking and circulation concerns associated with an increased intensity at this location. Then the Planning Commission reviewed the item in December of 2004 and denied the application in a 3-2 vote as indicated in the minutes attached in your staff report. And finally, the applicant did submit an appeal to the Planning Commission's denial, and that is what is before you this evening. The proposal involves Fitwise for Kids, as I've mentioned, and I'll let the applicant go into more detail. I'll give you a very brief summary. This is a fitness circuit center for children from ages 7 to 14. The site, the occupant size is approximately 1,600 square feet with front and rear entrances. There is a maximum expectancy of 13 children and then 3 employees at the site at any one time. A couple of housekeeping items before I present a brief summary on the analysis for this project. First, your staff reports indicate that there is 2-hour parking, time-limited parking in front of the site at El Camino. It's actually 1-hour time-limited parking. Secondly, the parking that we've indicated that may be located partially on the north side property adjacent to the site may actually be on the applicant's property, and I'll get into that in a little more detail as I explain the parking and circulation layout to you. As you know, we use GIS maps to assess property locations and building sites, etc., and there's a margin of error of between 1 and 3 feet for those maps. This one has more along the lines of a 5 to 8 foot margin of error, but that issue really isn't something that would alter this application before you this evening. We're really dealing with a 25-foot wide lot, and as I indicated before, I'll show you a site map that gives you more detail on that. And finally, in the draft use permit, there are a couple of minor language changes that we would recommend for the introduction and the introduction statement and condition number 6, if the council is inclined to approve this item. The areas that we looked at from the city staff perspective were parking, circulation, and land use. In terms of parking, we first looked at the parking standards. The precedence in terms of what the city has approved by way of Planning Commission use permits has been a requirement for 1 parking space for every 200 square feet of instructional facility. The applicant in this particular case is required to provide 7 parking spaces. Through a combination of on-site parking, assessment, district credit, and also an offer for an additional parking space on site, the applicant has credit for 6 parking spaces, and there therefore is a deficit of 1 space. In terms of adequacy, whether or not the 6 parking spaces are adequate for this proposal, staff does have some concerns in this area. First, the applicant does have a long-term business plan to obtain up to 200 clients, not at the site at any one time, of course, but at 13, as I mentioned before. Secondly, the city's downtown parking study and also recent staff surveys have found that the Williams Plaza is well utilized and does cause spillover onto adjacent blocks. Third, the El Camino Real parking in front of this site is heavily utilized around the peak hours of this application. And finally, we did have a recent instructional facility that relocated due to specific parking problems in this area at 626 El Camino Real. In terms of circulation, I'll give you just a brief summary of the requirements that exist in today's code. The diagram is hard to see, but I can summarize that for you in language. Basically, 45-degree parking requires a minimum 32-foot, 10-inch wide lot. In other words, you need about 20 feet to provide 45-degree angled parking, which is 18 feet long, and then you need another 13 feet for backup distance. As I mentioned, this lot is 25 feet in width, and 13-foot backup is required. The lot here provides an average of 11-foot backup space. Finally, the code also requires turnaround space for parking lots which have 4 or more spaces. This map to you will indicate where the parking spaces are and indicates the average 11-foot backup, which I've indicated. It's fairly light, but you've got the site here. You've got the 25-foot width indicated, and you also have an average. It varies because the parking spaces are different sizes, different lengths. You've got an average of 11-foot, 0.25 roughly, backup distance, which is below the 13-foot required. The second slide indicates existing versus required conditions, and although you can't tell in detail, the red dotted lines indicate the required 18-foot length for a parking space, and then contrast that with what's actually out there. And again, in order to maintain what the code would require, you'd really need a minimum 32-foot, 10-inch wide lot. In terms of circulation adequacy, the existing parking and circulation situation is non-conforming, which does not mean that the city would require a change to that for use which does not increase the intensity or an increased occupancy. However, with this proposed intensity and the increase in use compared to retail or office, staff does believe that the circulation conditions would be exacerbated. A couple of examples would include if you are entering the parking lot, you really need to cross over the alley into the other travel lane, the western travel lane, to enter the alley, which could cause a problem. And then secondly, if cars on the property to the north of the subject site are not parked precisely well, 1 or 2 inches off, that further affects the spaces on the subject site in terms of their ability to back up. It further constrains them. A picture is worth 1,000 words, I suppose, a moving picture, so I'll just ask for a brief moment for you to see. I think the council has visited the site and is familiar with it, but perhaps others that are watching or want a refresher on it can just get an idea of the constraints on the site in terms of backing up. And again, staff does not believe that with the existing uses, it presents a significant problem, but however, with an increase in use, perhaps 13 cars trying to come in and out of the property, there could be an issue. Okay, everyone survives. It's a happy ending. In terms of the final issue that we studied, land use, the general plan does support recreational facilities throughout the city, and staff does agree that this is a good use. The use could also complement surrounding commercial and land use designations. However, the proposed use is consistent with the specific land use designations for this property, which in the West Side Specific Plan and the General Plan are highway commercial and regional retail, or in the General Plan, highway service. Additionally, the Downtown Retail Task Force Citizens Advisory Committee made recommendations to preserve a diverse retail opportunity within this area, this particular area of the city, and that did include El Camino as well. In conclusion, we're recommending that the Council uphold the decision of the Planning Commission and deny the applicant's request for a conditional use permit. We do want to provide you with some options, however. Again, as I noted, there is an option to deny the request, secondly, to approve the request, and we provided a draft conditional use permit for you to facilitate that decision-making process. You could also add a condition, if you were inclined to approve the application, to allow the use for an interim time period and have it go back to the Planning Commission, perhaps for consideration and study of how the use was working in this particular area. And finally, you could add other conditions as you deem appropriate and incorporate those into the conditional use permit for an approval. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and the applicant also is here to provide a detailed presentation.
Are there questions for staff? Matt?
I had a question first off on the land use.
Brian, would you mind grabbing the lights for me, please, or turning them on? Thank you.
I had a question first on the land use issue because with the chart you provided, you talked about how there's a table on page 3 of the report that says that it's listing the land use categories, and it has the general plan and then the West Side specific plan and so forth. And then later in the report, it says that on that same page that while the proposed use could provide a complementary service to surrounding retail and service uses, the use does not appear to be consistent with the general plan use designation. And I don't know how to justify that last statement with the fact that there is an overlay that gives a entertainment and recreational facilities allowance. Can you help me out there?
The reason for the Entertainment and Recreation Overlay District was to allow site-specific consideration of these issues. So the properties within the Entertainment and Recreation Overlay will all have different land use designations. So the policy question for you this evening will be whether or not you think that the proposal is inconsistent with the land use designations, for example, in the West Side Plan and the General Plan, or whether you think it's complementary and therefore consistent.
Okay, so it's just a question of is it complementary? Just to summarize very quickly.
That's correct.
In a short statement, does this use complement the uses that are already there downtown?
And if it is consistent and complements, you as a council could make the argument and the finding, therefore, that it was consistent with the general plan.
Okay. The other question I had relates to the kind of the circulation, which is discussed on page 5, and parking in general. Wouldn't all of these difficulties, being that it's a substandard lot, I mean, if it's 25 feet wide, but it has parking that's already there as an existing condition, then it seems to me it's a bit like the thing I deal with, you know, all the time, where you might have a 4.5-foot setback, and staff allows you to continue on down the side yard at 4.5 feet because it's existing. It seems like that issue, that difficulty of parking and circulation, that's there whether we have this applicant who's asking for a use that is not in the general plan except as an overlay that possibly we can have a finding for it being complementary. But if they weren't looking for that kind of use, if they were just, I don't know, some kind of highway service, as you list in here, a small restaurant, an auto parts store, something like that, they wouldn't be here. They would just, you know, come in with their business. They'd have to go through the proper channels, of course, but they could have their business, and they're going to have those problems too. So, but you see what I'm saying?
Yes, and that's precisely the reason to bring up the nonconforming issue. The city would not require that there be improvements to the lot or that they find alternate property to provide a better circulation pattern if the use were not increasing, and it may be that you choose not to do that. But what you have before you is a request for a discretionary approval. So you have the authority to approve that or deny that based on the fact that, number one, there's an increased intensity in use. For example, as you said, if a retail or an office use went in, or an automotive use that did not require a use permit, the city would have no legal authority to require changes or to acknowledge the existing condition as deficient. Mm-hmm. But since you do have an increase in intensity and it is a conditional use, you do have that authority to make that determination.
Okay. We may or may not have an increase in intensity. Is that I mean, we can
There-
ask the applicant about their business plan and so forth.
Certainly you can,
Yeah.
right. The increased intensity that we are seeing here from the staff perspective is if you calculate what you normally get for an office or retail use compared to the goals of the applicant.
Now,
Matt, could you, hang on, I want to be clear, because I'm on the same point
Sure.
you are.
Okay, go ahead.
But whether the intensity increases or not increases, first on the parking side is still 7 versus 6, correct?
That's correct. So there is a parking
And then
shortage.
the same point that Matt brought up, it's also on page 5, the 10.6 to 11.9 versus 13 as the, so I'm trying to, same as you are, the circulation with 200 anticipated, there's still the per classroom size is still 13. Even if they had 13 or they had 18, which it doesn't increase the parking one way or the other. It's going to be 7, and it can't change the size of the lot, as you were saying, right? So I'm on the same dilemma that Matt is on this one.
Well, maybe a good way to look at it is what Councilmember Grocott brought up, which is the first-story addition, for example, on a residential lot that you can continue back on, even though it doesn't meet the current code today. But what happens is when you have a second-story addition, you then have to meet current code and step in your setbacks. So this is similar to that in the sense that it's almost like a second-story addition. The potential here for the applicant to increase the occupancy of this building and the people visiting this building is there, and that's the staff concern. But if the council says there is no increase in intensity and use, and therefore, we think this is an appropriate use for this location, you can continue the non-conforming status of the parking and circulation. So it's a staff concern, but it is your decision. Does that make sense? We see it as an increase in intensity and therefore an opportunity for you to look and consider whether or not you feel the circulation and parking is adequate.
Although where we diverge from the example of the side yard issue is that we could get an increase in intensity from a business wanting to go into Mr. Girdlestone's site, and yet if they were highway service, they wouldn't be before the Planning Commission or us, because they would simply, again, they'd have to go through proper channels, business license and all that, but if they meet the general plan use designation, they can go in there and they could be, say it's an auto parts store.
Right.
He meets the general thing here, and if he's got 200 customers a day, that's pretty intense use, but he doesn't have to come here before us and...
Right, and that's right.
Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Line of thinking?
That's correct. You just, the industry standards of retail generally aren't as intensive as that, but that's the right type of reasoning.
Okay. Now, I've got, I think, just one more question, and that is I'm wondering if staff at all struggled with the 200 per square feet number, because we don't have anything in our municipal code. And by the way, I put a note here, that's kind of a side issue. We might want to look at that at some point and get something in our code. But I'm wondering how much staff struggled with that number, because what was come up with, the solution was to compare it to a fitness health club use, which to me, like for instance, when I go to 24-hour Nautilus, it's all adults. They drive in, they park, they work out, they leave. And then you mentioned the fencing club, and I put a note here, what was the adult or children mix in that business? Because what the applicant has before us is, yeah, they're working out, but the little clients that come there don't drive cars. They get brought there by their parents and dropped off, or they take scoot, or they walk down from the youth center, or they ride their bicycle, or whatever. They don't drive their car, park it, and work out and then leave and then get a ticket from the police officer because they're only 14 years old. So I see a little bit of difference, and that's one of the things I'm struggling with. I'm wondering how much staff struggled with that.
There is, and there are parking references in the code that we could use that are very strict on these types of facilities, but we try to apply, since we have discretion ability in the parking code, a more common sense approach and say, what does this business actually need? So there are two issues for you to look at, and I just want to make sure to separate those. You've got parking. You can say, the parking is sufficient here. That works if you choose to do that. And then, is the circulation sufficient? Is the circulation okay with the number of clients you may have coming in between 3:30 and 5:30, for example, after school?
Maybe I can shed some light, actually, as a parent of 3 boys that would be in this age range. But generally, you would stay with your child until they're about 10 years old. You know, that you wouldn't just drop and let them run in and expect them to sort of handle themselves. Parents of kids 10 and under, especially girls, maybe even 11 or 12 and under, will go in and generally sit while they go through the class and not just leave them. So I would anticipate that the 12, 13, and 14-year-olds may get on their bikes and come down to work out. In fact, quite probably would. But the ones, if you look at the age range, and then the other thing that I would point out is that most of this activity is going to be occurring after school, which is generally after 3 o'clock. So a 3:30 to about 5:30 time frame, I think, is when realistically you're going to get the school-age kids, not obviously excluding the summer, but the school-age kids coming down and wanting to work out. So maybe keep that in mind. It's not, like an auto parts store where you get people driving and stopping and shopping all day long. I think we're going to see very focused time periods where there's going to be very heavy usage, and then other time frames or time periods where there'd be relative or zero usage probably. But I'm sure the applicant can speak to that as well.
So, and had an observation regarding the economic consequences of this. Granted, this is not a planning discussion when you talk about economics, perhaps, but do you see some economic benefit, Liz, in terms of the mothers bringing the kids, doing some shopping, picking them up, in effect bringing people into the downtown area for more than just this event?
That's where you can argue that the use would be complementary to the surrounding uses. That's the argument that you would make, and it really depends on I think the individual families' styles as to how they're going to work it. They still need to find parking if you're going to ask them to take advantage of the surrounding uses.
But it may not be here. It could be across the street. It could be in another lot.
That's correct. And in terms of economics, Leslie Parks also submitted some comments on the application with concerns both about retail opportunities and losses, and also about economics in that same respect. So.
Another observation on the parking. We talk about the 6 spaces being available, and it is a rather tight alleyway to back out from. But it does seem to me that another use, such as a real estate office or a mortgage broker perhaps, or something which entertains both workers and customers, will experience the same situation. I'm not too sure we gain anything by holding out for another use simply because it's because this is kind of a lot. I think we're going to have that no matter what goes in there.
And I agree, and I see that as a theme for the council discussion tonight. What we're really trying to draw attention to is not that fact, but really what happens if you intensify the use potentially, and are you exacerbating the issues there?
Well, quickly, not to beat it dead, it is a theme. Whoever you put in there is going to be parking in there, and if it's a retail, whatever it is, and I was trying to think of other uses. I had the same observation, Matt. What happened what was our experience with the fencing class, or with the current user? People are not using it now. Blank. I was looking at it.
The prior user. Well, the fencing, they obviously relocated because they had parking problems in the area. But there were more adults. But again, we expect that all of the patrons here would be arriving by car, even if they weren't driving.
Well, then when Matt said that these little people, these are 13, 14, they're not going to be so little, but the commonality is not driving. And they're going to be dropped off, as Inga said, and I won't argue whether it's a 10 that the mother or male or female, they get out and get in. But once they get used to the thing, they're going to drop you off and off they go. But I'm on some of the same theme as Tom, is that whatever we put there, whoever parks there, you're going to go into a retail store, get out of the car, park the car, you're going to have that same scenario we saw on the film clip here, where I got to back out and get back out into the thing. Secondly so to me there's 2 issues. Parking, 7 versus 6, we got a 1-car issue here. And number 2, the circulation issue, and I would not argue, but would say that whatever we put in there is going to be a circulation issue. Whatever retailer stops there, because we have tried to get people to use the back ends of both Wheeler, all of the plazas to use the parking side. And as a frequent user of that parking lot, I'm there a couple of times a week. The people who drive through those, it's a very narrow area, and even at night, people would drive quite slowly. They don't really, it's not a real, I know it sounds like highway use, but the backside is really it is a parking lot, and people drive a little bit slower. So
Should we ask questions on this?
We're going to have the same problem with whoever we put it.
That's correct.
Yeah, you should ask them now. Matt has a couple of questions specific to the conditional use permit.
Thought I was done. Sorry about that. If we go to the draft conditional use permit, item 3, it says circuit training classes shall not be scheduled during the peak hours of 5 p.m. to 6:30, and that to me sounds like a complete shutdown on the business, but I wasn't sure if that's what staff meant, because I was comparing that to the statement of appeal by the applicant and their statement on how the business is run is that there are essentially no classes, that a client comes in on their own schedule. This sounds to me exactly like curbs,
Right.
where you come in whenever you want, and then you're there for 45 minutes. You have a designed circuit that you go through, but it's not like you have to be there at 5:30 or 3:30 or any particular time. So I was trying to get those two to be parallel, and they're not quite parallel.
That's really part of the applicant's appeal. Staff's concern is primarily during those times, and what we wanted to offer you through a draft use permit and an option to approve the application was a mitigator, essentially. So that's what we're doing, is proposing during the time when Wheeler is most congested and the area, we're really basing it on parking and traffic mitigations.
Okay. And then the last question on this particular piece is item 10. The Planning Commission reserves the right to review this conditional use permit. This would be if we approved it for the audience. The Planning Commission reserves the right to review this conditional use permit and, where's the word, to revoke it if things don't seem to be working out. And I was just wondering how that works legally if we're making a decision as a city council. This has now come to city council, and we're making a decision, and then our Planning Commission, which is an advisory body to us, revokes the decision we made. I had a little bit of a problem with that. It seems like it should come to, if it's going to be revoked, it would have to be revoked by the city council, not the Planning Commission.
It's a little bit out of the revocation process. It's outlined in the code, but I can't imagine why we couldn't put it in as a condition.
But perhaps, the Planning Commission, should it go that way, and if the Planning Commission voted to revoke it, then it could be appealed to City Council. However, if it comes straight to City Council, there's no appeal process. So generally, that's why it would be done at the Planning Commission level, if that were the case, so that there is an appeal step. Is that right, Bob?
Bob's okay with that?
Bob's okay with that.
All right, good. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, I know the applicant is here. If there's no more questions for staff, I suggest that we turn this over to the applicant. If she'd like to,
Thank you,
I have a
Liz.
speaker slip for her, and then I do have speaker slips for several other people in the audience. So, Miss, okay, I'm going to miss Lakshmi Yoko. Just come on up to the microphone, please. And if you could just state your name and city of residence. Actually, for my fellow council members, we're going to ask for city of residence from this point forward. We're not going to ask for
Good
actual
evening,
addresses.
Madam Mayor, Councilman. Lakshmi Yokoyama, applicant, owner franchise of FitWise for Kids for San Carlos. I do live in San Mateo, actually, if you wanted residence, but I've been in business here for 6 years, located on Cherry Street as a mortgage banker. I'm not going to repeat all of these information because there's some other people here that would like to speak. So I just want to address the circulation or the perceived circulation problem. I have a report, and I have 2 months report from September and October of the only facility that is now open, which is located in Novato. And I know that there were some concerns, especially between 3 o'clock when the kids are off school. So I'm just going to go down. This is a summary of activity between September 1st to October 1st of 2004. And at 3 o'clock on September 1st, there were between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, there were 3 kids that worked out. On Wednesday, September 1st. Between 4 and 5 o'clock, there were 4 kids. And between 5 and 6 o'clock, there were 2 kids. and between 6 and 7, there were 3. Of course, the center is open starting at 10 o'clock, but obviously we're there in the mornings only to market and sign up people. Let's go to another day. Friday. There were between 3 and 4 o'clock, 3 kids worked out. Between 4 and 5 o'clock, 1 person was there. Between 5 and 6, 4 people. And between 6 and 7, 1. Let's go on a weekend. Sunday, we're open at 10 o'clock. We open at 9 o'clock on the weekends. On Sunday, there was 1 child that worked out that came between 10 and 11. Again, it's not a class, so they come at their convenience. So they could come at 10:15 and end at 11, or they can come at 10:01 and end at 10:46. At 12 noon, there was 1 child. This is on Saturday, September 19th. Okay? On a Friday, the first child, 1 child, came at 3 o'clock, between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And 2 more kids came between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Nobody came between 5 and 6, and at 6 o'clock, 3 kids came. Again, since this report is not by minute, it gives you an idea of the circulation problem. When I did all these numbers, it really averaged to about 10 kids per day. And that's open from 10 o'clock to 8 o'clock on Mondays to Fridays, and 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday. So any other business like we've discussed will have hopefully similar amount of people going in and out of that business to be able to thrive. The reason I chose this location, I actually signed my franchise agreement way back in September. I looked at 2 properties in Belmont, and I really wanted, my heart said San Carlos, because I've been in this community. I belong to the San Carlos Lions Club and participate in a lot of the youth community activities. And I happened to talk to Mr. Girdlestone, and this facility became open. One of the tenants left 1 month early. In order to be successful in this business, it's a new franchise. It's relatively unknown. We are, right now, where Curves was 10 years ago. Curves has 4 million women working out. So hopefully in 10 years we'll have the same numbers. But location is important. And I believe that El Camino will provide me with with exposure. I also believe that as a mom, I would like to be able to drop off my child, park, bring the child in, leave, and then do some other errands. I mean, Trader Joe's is right there. I mean, you can go shopping in 30 minutes and while your child is working out. Basically, I really believe that it's a good place. Like I said, I've looked other places. I'm still looking. Margaret knows this. We've been trying to find other locations that are acceptable and will not have any problems with the planning department. Are there any questions right now? Because there's other people that are going to be speaking.
I had one question for you. I noted that under one of the statements that you had said that at no point there would be more than 12 people in the facility, 2 of them being, I'm assuming, staff members, so 10 kids. Do you have any way that you're planning to use that to control that? So, for example, if during the summer you end up, with 10, 12 kids showing up?
I actually have to monitor it. The other report that I have, the facility in Novato has been open. It'll be a year in February. It's a very slow process. 20 kids the first month, 24 kids the next month, another 20 kids the following month. There's 1 month they only signed up 7 kids. So the only way I can answer that is I have to follow that when it gets to that point, because I really don't know how successful it's going to, or how well it's going to be accepted here in this community. I mean, this is a soccer community, a baseball community. It's a big chance. It's a big risk for me. We can carpool. I can talk to the youth, Jerry Fujimoto, and see whether we can sort of coordinate time, because I know Scoot can come from there to perhaps to my location. and limit the number of kids and kind of just stagger it if there's a problem.
Matt?
Lakshmi, if it's a conditional question, because it
Okay.
would be conditional on if we did approve this.
Correct.
It seems to me by the numbers you gave with the various days and how many kids you get, I saw the max number there is 4 at any one time. So if this were approved, and you've got in here in the draft conditional use permit that the staff wrote up, the number that Inga referenced, which is 12, which includes both students and instructors. How many instructors then is that?
There's a franchise is supposed to have a manager and a adult that supervises
Yeah.
to make sure that kids go from one machine to the next. Sorry,
So we're looking at 10
10
8
kids
to 10 kids
and
at the most.
1 or 2 adults.
Okay, so my question is, if you had a conditional use permit and we put a time limit on it, say for 2 years, it sounds like what you're saying from what's going on in Novato, in that time, if in a 2-year time you have a consistent population of 8 kids that want to work out at the same time, you're going to be going gangbusters. Do you see yourself even wanting to stay in that location necessarily beyond, say, 2 years if you're that successful? In other words, does that, what I'm asking then is, does Howard's
I want to be able to grow, yes.
Yeah, and does Howard's site fit for your growth? Or would you be then looking for another site because you'd be outgrowing it essentially?
Well, I have not signed a long-term lease with Howard. And again, it's been a year for Novato. They only have 140 kids as of October. And my target is 200. And again, I don't know how the community will perceive and accept the business. So if you grant me a 2-year conditional use permit, and I'm able to obtain a 2-year lease from Mr. Girdlestone, all I can say is I have to assess whether I am going to be able to grow further in that time span. In other words, I don't see it where I don't see myself within the next 6 months having 100 enrollees. It's not growing that fast. It's not growing that fast.
But from a business perspective, I mean, if you're trying to start up a business, generally one wouldn't want a restriction of 2 years arbitrarily placed on this and have you to, if it sunsets in 2 years, then you as an applicant have to come back through the process, back through the appeal,
Right.
back through the
Well,
approval
beggars
process.
can't be
So that could be
choosers. I've
quite
already been
cumbersome.
declined. Sorry. I'm saying beggars can't be choosers. I've already been declined by the planning department. So if I get a 2-year use permit, I'm a very happy person.
The thing, for my fellow council members, the thing I'm trying to weigh here is Leslie Parks had put in a comment about, if we do this too much, we can cannibalize ourselves in terms of sales tax and so forth. But on the other hand, having empty storefronts, and we have plenty of them along the El Camino, does us no benefit either. And so I can see a sort of a win-win situation here where the applicant gets to put in their business, they're on a 2-year or 3-year, whatever we want to say, conditional use permit. I would think if her business is getting this kind of population that she's willing to accept in the conditional use permit of 8 to 10 students.
Matt, can I ask you to save your comments till kind of the end, and that way we can get through the speakers?
All right.
I know where you're going with that, and I think, we all do.
Okay. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah. One further question. In the draft conditional use permit, there is this condition regulating no classes between 5 and 6:30.
Madam Mayor, it's not a class circuit.
Oh, sorry, there's no circuit, well, it's called circuit training
That would
classes.
be detrimental to the business plan. That would be detrimental.
So you would be opposed to that condition?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions for the applicant?
Quick one. Same point. The heaviest uses was 3 to 7, so you could not live with this. I know we're repeating this, but I want to hear you.
That would be very hard.
It's on your addendum. Second, there's no other San Carlos location providing accessibility, safety and accessibility?
You know,
I'm not questioning you, Lashke. I'm just saying, did you look at other?
I've looked everywhere. I am a realtor and I have access to
Yeah.
MLS. The ones on El Camino, there's a lot that are about 800 square feet, 900 square feet.
So I'm saying based upon the size that you
size,
need, you know,
I needed the
because there are a
size.
couple of others that are quite somewhat
smaller.
larger, but you don't need all that space.
And then they also have the warehouses in
Right.
industrial, which are about 2,400 square feet, which is
And
much
finally,
too big.
item 2E, it says, we'll organize a voluntary staggered rear drop-off. If this is sort of at random, in other words, people just come and get into the system like they do with curves, how do you organize the drop-off?
Well, you know, when a parent signs up for this business, we're going to have to counsel them and find out, hey, how do you plan to drop off your kid? Are they going to walk from school? Are they going to, you know, we have to ask questions because we have to have a one-on-one relationship with the parents.
Okay. There's no more questions for the applicant. We'll move through this. Next, Marge Gable. Followed by Philip Schechter. You need to speak loudly if you want anybody to hear you. Much better, thank you.
My name is Margaret Gable. I live in San Mateo. 465 Avenue.
We're not taking addresses anymore, but thank you very much.
I work for the Department of Transportation as an environmental planner, and I'm here tonight for Lakshmi as a friend. Our sons have grown up together from elementary school, middle school, then on to high school. I would encourage the City Council to approve the conditional use permit for this location at 638 El Camino Real in San Carlos to run a children's instructional exercise program. I really believe that there's a critical need for parents to have available to them a convenient location which is an alternative for physical exercise for children. And I think everyone already agreed that the evidence is out there that this type of alternative activity sources is needed because, for instance, the Department of Education in California and their 2003 report let us know that 25% of the students in the grades serviced by Lakshmi's business are not physically fit. The schools have been unable to provide enough activity for the students, and I think as a parent myself, I'd like to see more opportunities, especially such as business, like the curves, the exercise routes, the shoulders. The location at 638 El Camino Real would be a very accessible location. I know this because my children are attending the Tat Wong Kung Fu Academy, which is located in Bel Mateo, just El Camino. And children have been there for about 10 years. That particular facility teaches martial arts, and the students there could be classes, they're actual classes of 10 to 30 students at a time, and the classes are back to back so that when students are leaving, students are arriving. So there could be up to 60 people wandering around just off of El Camino trying to get into that facility. And as a parent over that time period, I see very little problem with people in terms of parking or circulation because the parents' primary concern is the safety of their children. If they're worried about the exercise for their children, they're certainly going to be worried about the children getting in and out of the facility. There's pretty limited parking over there. There's a lot of businesses, and we all kind of have our little spot where we go and park. Take the children and walk over to the facility, go inside with them when they were very young, waited. This is what the mothers did. They all waited for the children for 45 minutes until they were old enough, and now they're old enough, both boys are old enough where I just observe that they entered into the facility, and then I go off. And what I do is I go to places, I take my dog to Fancy Feet here in San Carlos for his grooming. I go off to the lawns in the near the Double Tail area. I also take off to the Gold's Gym for my own exercise. I think also the big concern as a parent is that it's a safe situation. And I know there's only, I listened here, heard there's 6 parking lots behind that building, but there's not the only parking spaces available in the area. And a parent who wants their child to participate in this type of exercise, this alternative type of exercise, and may not want to be on a sports team, will just find a place to park and walk their children over there. So I really would encourage the council to consider this conditional use application, and I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Phil Schechter, followed by Howard Girdlestone, please.
Good evening. I'm Phil Schechter, and I reside in Redwoods Shores. And I'm here speaking in favor of the applicant and her application. I've taken the time to go through all of the documents that she has submitted to the planning and to council. And I'd like to just, some of the things that Mr. said, I think were exactly where I was heading, and I'd like to just highlight a few of those concerns and questions. On page 4 of the report, it is the council, the agenda staff report. It talks about a couple of things. One, under B, under parking, it talks about the spaces per square footage of area. And it references that this is a fitness health club use based on having looked at other cities that have fitness health club use, that they have a requirement of 1 space per 200 square feet. Previously, they had talked about, and they also alluded to that the city of San Carlos has used 300 square feet per parking space. So if you went by that definition for this particular activity, you'd be looking at 5 parking spaces. If you go by what the city staff is characterizing as a fitness health club use, which this is really not. This circuit training for children is totally different than the Pacific Athletic Club or Fitness 21 or the others in which you have, vehicles after vehicles parked because you have adults with their children. So you have all kinds of activities going on. So then the question came into my mind is how would you look at this? And when I looked at this, quite frankly, it talked about because of the public's parking, I guess, in Williams Plaza, it talked about 1.27 parking spaces. Now, I don't know what a 0.27% parking space is, but I can't imagine putting a quarter car in a parking space. So from my perspective, I'm looking at 6 parking spaces, 5 that are associated with private use of this property, and 1 apparently with the Williams Plaza. And what went through my mind is if you don't have a place for this to fit because it's not really a fitness or a health club, then don't make it 7 parking places. Don't make it 200 feet parking place, and you may decide that it's not quite what the 5 parking place requirements are, so you compromise it and you say, okay, this particular use requires 6 parking places, and they have them. In reading the staff recommendations, I was concerned about the recommendations about not letting people get in and off of the vehicles in the back of the building. And when I went out and looked at this property, that bothered me for several reasons. One is there is an entrance to this plaza right alongside of the Captain's Table restaurant from El Camino. You can circulate in from El Camino, you can circulate in from Cherry Street, and you can go right into the back of this building, and you can let children off. And it's not even, the doorway is not on the back of the building, it's actually on the side of the building. There's 2 of them, in fact. I would rather see children getting out there than getting out on El Camino, and especially in this particular block of El Camino. And I took a look at that as well. And that gets me back to the first part of page 4 where it speaks about the use, and it references, I guess over on page 3, highway service and regional retail. Well, I submit that I don't know of any highway service or regional retail that's going to want to go into this location or along that area. You're in one of the busiest parts of El Camino, just south of San Carlos Avenue, and you're not going to get an auto parts store to go in there because there's going to be no parking for the auto part customers. And that you're talking about a lot of vehicles when you go down to some of the auto part places like the one in Redwood City. They always have vehicles parked there. So that's not going to work. You're not going to put a gas station there for terms of highway services. That's not going to happen. And so when you get out there and you look, what do you see? You see a nail salon, you see a mortgage broker, you see an empty building, you see a restaurant on the corner. But what I didn't see was retail space, and there was some type of a pet salon. And I
Phil,
think, yes.
you have a 2-minute limit.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry.
You can come back after, or you can, if you've got a conclusion.
Let me try to finish up
okay,
real
that'd be
quickly.
wonderful.
Okay.
Thanks.
So my comments are that the use definition for that area is just inapplicable for that area, and if you were to restrict that use, you're basically taking the property owner and you're saying you can't do anything with your property. And if that's the case, you might as well condemn the property and the city acquire it. Because how can you put tenants in there or business use in that property if you're going to limit it in the way which we're hearing is being requested by planning? Now, my other comment, and then I'll finish, has to do with the recommendations. First of all, it makes absolutely no sense to try to say you can't have your circuit training between 5 and 6:30 p.m. That is not acceptable to the applicant.
We already established that
Okay.
point. Thank you.
The other thing is item 6, where it says no drop-off or pickup parking is permitted in the rear area of the building or any other private public area located behind the building. Why not? If you have 5 parking places, that should be eliminated.
I think my understanding is that means that they're not designated as drop-off or pickup only, that they would be just standard parking places. Is that correct, staff?
That's not what it says, though.
It says, a parking space is a parking space unless they're designated as for loading and unloading only. And my understanding is that it would be indicated that those would not be so designated.
Well, what it says is absolutely, it says no drop-off or pickup parking is permitted.
Correct. That means no loading or unloading only parking spaces. Those parking spaces would be standard parking spaces. And staff is over there nodding their heads.
Okay, so then the word only should be inserted, I guess, in that sentence. Is that correct?
No, I think if you find that it's unclear language, perhaps we, if this were to move forward, would find a better way to clarify the language.
All right. I'll end it at this because I'm sure I'm way over my time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Howard, followed by Warren Jindal. Sorry if I can't read your writing here.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I am the owner of 638 El Camino. I'm quite sure all of us here would prefer to see an excellent retail store at this location. I know I would. But El Camino is not conducive to retail. It is destination shopping. There is no foot traffic. I have 5 excellent retail tenants on Laurel Street: Alta Dress Shop, Chef Shop, which is the kitchenware, Hallmark Cards, Sterling Interiors, and the Christian Bookstore. And only one of these tenants, I believe, could do equally well on El Camino, the Christian Bookshop, because it's more of a destination. Now, the occupancies in the 600 block are the Singular Wireless, the Carlos Club, Rin's Bridal Gowns, then there's a vacancy, Professional Financial, Posh Nail Salon, then there's a vacancy, there's a dog grooming, there's a yoga studio, there's a new beauty salon in the building where there are 7 apartments, which is adjacent to the south, the Captain's Restaurant, Custom Creations, and the China Chef. Now, all of these are destination shops. There is no retail in there other than for Rin's Bridal Gowns, and that to me is really a destination shop. There is no foot traffic, and that's why these locations are there. Thank you.
Howard, can I ask you a quick question?
Certainly.
Do you own the property at 632 or 630, I think it's 632 or 636 El Camino?
Oh, that's
next
my
door?
son.
Okay. And the reason I'm asking is because on the staff report, the parking spaces seem to overlap onto the site next door.
No, they don't, Inga. That's a misunderstanding there. I went with.
It's not correct on the aerial photo's not correct?
That is correct. Ms. Cullenhan and Margaret and I went there today, and that is a misconception in that aerial photograph.
Okay.
The city, if this is 638 El Camino, and next door is my son's, the yoga, so forth, there is a yellow stripe there. That is city parking. The city took over that property maybe 40 or 50 years ago. I don't know when. But they, by right of eminent domain, they took over that property to make it public parking. But there is no overlap in any way, shape, or form. Is that?
It's an issue that we need to resolve.
You're not on.
We measured it today from this side to this side, and it's 25 feet.
As I stated in the staff report,
Just come on up to the podium. I'm sorry.
Thank you. That's an issue that we still need to resolve. We went out there and did meet with the property owner, Mr. Girdlestone. The aerial maps, as I noted before, generally have a margin of error between 1 to 3 feet. This is much greater, so we would need to resolve that issue through another method. But it doesn't have bearing on the application, in our opinion.
Because the city's not planning to restripe, I mean, it wouldn't gain the city any benefit to restripe the lot and to go all the way to the property line.
For that reason, number one, and number two, the property owner and staff are both in agreement that the property is, in fact, 25 feet wide. So those are the parameters that we're working within.
Okay.
But before, Liz, it is, according to the aerial map, it says 11.25 backup on,
That's correct, from the actual spaces out there,
but those spaces are incorrect.
which means, perhaps, if you have a 25-foot wide lot and you have a 11.5,
Right.
you can tell from the math that you can't meet the parking requirements that are indicated today.
At 13.
That's correct. It would be, you need 20 feet to have an 18-foot-long, 45-degree parking space. I don't want to interrupt Mr. Girdlestone, but I did have two other points to make when he's done.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Howard, you're done,
Yeah,
right?
okay. I just want to say that our lot is 25 feet up to the city line. There's no overlapping of our property into the city property. That yellow line parallels the building next door directly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Ms.
And
Cullinan?
just 2 points of clarification, since it has come up a few times. The Kumon Learning Center is probably another good example for you, where we did use the 1 per 200 square feet of area for parking requirements. And also Curves does have a time-limited condition in their conditional use permit. I thought that might be good background.
What is that?
And Kumon has a 2-year CPU.
That's correct. They'll be coming back.
It does have a 2-year.
That's correct. Good point.
I'm sorry, what is the time limit in Curves?
1 to 3?
They're
They're prohibited.
Not open from
That's
1
right.
to 3.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Warren Gendel, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, followed by Howie Clark.
Good evening. I live in Novato, California.
Again, could you speak up, state your name and just city of residence?
Yeah, Warren Gendel, Novato in Marin County. I'm actually the founder of FitWise for Kids corporate, and presently we have 5 locations that we've sold franchise to from New Jersey all the way to the West Coast, and it's rapidly growing from the recognition we're getting from our program. I'm just here to answer questions that you might have regarding the Novato location and how our system works, and the use permit that we're acquiring actually is very conducive to the location. The thing we have to look at, too, is drop-offs for middle schools or elementary schools on that type of a situation. That is much more hazardous than what we're dealing with, because at one point in time when you have the parents dropping the kids off in an elementary school or middle school, there's a big congestion of traffic there. What we do is it's the convenience of the parents, so there is no set time, so that really makes it a very staggered type of a situation. Madam Mayor, one of your points of being a mother, we find that in our location, we make it very important to the parents that they don't stay during that circuit program because the kids really are very overwhelmed the fact that they have their own facility to attend to. And the parents are real excited about seeing the programs, seeing the results that the kids are getting, self-esteem to weight loss, just to the whole process of what we're doing, to that they can actually take their time and do shopping. So on an economic standpoint for the cities, it does a phenomenal thing for the local businesses. The parents really take advantage of that quality time they can do to shop, do whatever they need to do to support the local business. So I think there's a lot of speculation of what we're trying to accomplish here on the unknowns that could occur. But I really believe that under the use, if we have some type of a time frame to prove ourselves, I think it would be a great advantage to the city of San Carlos to have this particular business, downtown at that location. It's a great location. I've come down here a lot, and right past the Captain's restaurant, there's plenty of parking, and every time I've been around, there's always spots right in front of that location all the time, as well as around that big parking lot. There's plenty of parking, in my opinion, for the parents to take that time to drop their kids, walk them to the location, and then do their shopping.
Okay. Matt, did you have a question?
One question. It was mentioned in Lakshmi's report that there is some retail, albeit minor, with franchise materials that get sold. I guess Fitzwise for kids, you tell me, T-shirts, right?
Correct. Yeah, we have apparel, T-shirts, baseball hats, sweatbands.
And what kind of success or rate of sale do you have with those products in the Novato?
It's actually starting to peak. In terms of the revenue, I would say there's a good 10% of the revenue.
Okay.
Of the we do in terms of we have sales of water, and Gatorade that we do provide as well. So that's significant.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One other question, Tom.
In terms of the forward look, could a place of this type accommodate 400 or 500 kids, or do you really max out in terms of space?
Well, if you look at the success rate of a Curves, for example, they can facilitate 700 memberships in a location that's 1,500 square foot, just because of the design of how circuit training is and on the appointment base. I think what we're going for is that 200 number is it's a nice number to obtain. And I think when you go beyond that, on a business standpoint, I think Lakshmi would open up another location, possibly in Belmont, because I think you definitely can pull in a lot of different areas, and people will go to certain areas. But the idea is to start and be very successful with one, and if there is an overlap, she would open up her second one, and I encourage her to open up the second one. With it being on the franchise part of it, my goal is to have one owner's own 3 or 4 of them. That's their success.
Okay, thank you very much. Howie Clark.
Hello, Howard Clark, and I reside in Belmont. I'm a local realtor here in San Carlos. I work for Dumas and Company, and I'm here to encourage you to give Lakshmi this space. Just from the point of the realtor, I'm going to reiterate, and I already realized that the council and some of the people realize that the likelihood of a typical or destination type retail outlet, I've done a lot of business opportunities here in town in all the mid-peninsula cities, that the likelihood of a less a tenant there or anything long-term is very unlikely that they would either survive or flourish. And I really think that her type of business fits it much more. I mean, to me, it's obvious. Just a look up and down the peninsula, and like we said, what we don't need is more vacant storefronts. And I really think that's what we're going to end up with if we try to get retail only in there, because it's just not going to happen. Also, I do feel that her percentage of parking, even though we're not compliant there space-wise, we are adjacent to a public lot, which is beneficial, and she will have a high percentage of drop-off customers there with kids or bicyclers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a speaker request from Cheryl Palmer. Is this the item? Okay. Oh, okay.
Cheryl Pomerink with the San Carlos Chamber of Commerce, and I would like to speak for the application. I think this is a good business fit for San Carlos and the active, healthy lifestyles of our citizens. I think that it's going to take off and be much better than any of us anticipate. And as sensitive as I am to the parking and the traffic issues in this town, I don't think the concern is warranted here. I think the nature of this program, which is stressing physical fitness, is going to have parents encourage their youngsters to walk, to bicycle. I think that's part of the whole look of what the program does. I also think youngsters can take Scoot, and the parking on the side, as people have talked about next to Custom Creations and the captain's table, is easy for parents to come around and park there if they need to and drop them off. I also think you need to keep remembering, as has been said before, but I want to emphasize it, that this age group is 7 to 14, so they're not going to park. I had a niece living with me who went to the Yoga for Health place next door, and that was all adults, and they would be there for an hour, and the classes would start do start at a set time. So they're all coming at the same time. They're all leaving at the same time. The staggered use here, I think, is going to be much easier. I also wanted to remind you that the parking study that was done a couple of years ago showed that the biggest impact of parking stress in the downtown area is between 11:30 and 1:30. And most of the students would be coming at a different time than this, so that shouldn't be a problem. And I also agree with comments that have been made with Leslie, the community director, development director's comment, that this could be very good for business if there are folks who do drop off their kids. It's not enough usually to get back home, and so your tendency is to go around the corner, park, have a cup of coffee, run into Diddham's or the Hallmark store or something like that. And so I think it can be a bit of a boon for business, which in this town right now could use it. So I would encourage you to support this application and give them a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Is there anyone else here from the public that wishes to speak on this item? Come on up. State your name and city of residence for the record, please.
Hi, Edward Stansel. I own the scooter shop, or Stansel Motors, on El Camino and Arroyo, the only left turn to San Carlos. We have a new product. We have a parking problem. We've got the new auto rickshaw, three-wheelers. I'm thinking if they had 2 or 3 of these for their employees to drive, that would give an extra space, in which case everybody would be happy. But actually, I like their idea, and I think any business in San Carlos is good. And there's so many empty spots. It looks like a disaster area. You're upset about the cars parking along El Camino with for sale signs on them. That used to be all car lots there. They're coming back home. No. Anyway, I'd like to give you, the council members, a copy of the new Bajaj auto rickshaw. And I'm thinking for Scoot, since the big buses are going by with just 1 or 2 people on them, and these get 80 miles per gallon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, we'll pass them out. Great, thanks. All right. Liz, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Just a closing comment. If Leslie is watching this on television, I think she'd be upset if I didn't correct a statement. Leslie actually had the opposite concern that Cheryl had brought up, just that she was concerned about this use going in at this location rather than it could complement the businesses surrounding. So I just wanted to clarify that point since she wasn't able to be here tonight.
Okay.
The reason of?
From trying to preserve what the Downtown Retail Task Force Committee wanted of providing retail opportunities.
Okay. And just
direct.
For staff and for the people in the audience, I just actually received a memo, haven't had a chance to read it yet, from Leslie Parks related to this item, as have my fellow council members. So,
okay, thank you.
We did get a copy of it late, but better late than never, I think. Having heard our last speaker. Anyone else? Last chance from the public. Okay, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Okay. Discussion. Who wants to start?
Well, I'll kick it off. To me, Liz hit on it. There are really two issues, parking and circulation. I think we can agree, having heard the issue of the use. It is not a prohibited use, and it does fall within the broad range of the overlay of the district, the entertainment and recreation. So for me, I was looking first at the parking issue in terms of what the restriction was, and I find that I ended up with what I didn't know was the Phil Schechter method of calculating parking. And that is, I took 7 and 12 too. 7 and 5 too, because one, it really didn't fit. It had this 200 square foot, didn't fit for me. Took 7 and 2, added them up, divided by 2, and I got 6. So I thought, anyway, it's
Wait,
real
and you're a
arbitrary.
banker? 7 and 2 divided by 2 is 6?
7 and 5.
Oh, 7
is
and
12
5.
divided by
Okay.
2 is 6. One, if you look, and that's why I called it the Phil Schechter method, because I wrote 7 in the margin and 5 in the second paragraph. And my point is that it's an arbitrary number, because this is really kind of unusual. Back to the circulation, I think for me, we don't know. And we put restrictions on circulation some years ago when we talked about restaurants, saying, we would be downtown. And I know Howard's sitting there, 15, 16 years ago, we had these arbitrary restrictions. I think if we push back and say, what is business, what are we trying to do? We're trying to make this a business-friendly area, and we're trying to encourage, instead of stereotyping and saying we've heard, only a destination retail location is going to work there. I don't know what's going to work there, but I'm willing, if this lady's willing to take a try, and we can see that it could generate some activity, that we push back and not put our little boxes around things and our 7 parking places and our 200 square foot, and let the market reach its own effort. So I would be willing to, the motion is, to affirm the denial, and I would move to reverse that denial, and it would include the reversing of on the conditional use permit number 7. That's my view. I'm sorry, not number 7. I got 7 on my mind. The hours.
Would you limit the term on that, Mike?
Say again?
Limit the term?
Sunset clause?
I'm open to my colleagues. I'm with Matt on this one on a 2-year limitation, but if you can live with a 2-year limitation, then come back and we revisit it in 2 years or 3. I think 2 years is a little short. But I'm open. I'll throw out 3 since I've been accused of bad math here. 3 years.
Okay.
I'm going to agree with Mike entirely, and I like the comment about not putting boxes around the business with either the parking or actually some of the things that are in the conditional use permit as drafted by staff. I would line out item 3. Reason being is if there's a problem and it becomes a circulation problem, and with all due respect to staff, I think the staff report hit on the things that were important, circulation and parking.
Well, that's covered on 10.
And that's right, and that's what I'm saying is rather than put some arbitrary boxes around things, let's just let the market do what the market's going to do. If it becomes a problem, then item 10 is going to kick in. It might be a good problem. You're exactly right. So I would cross out item 3, and then I think we need to look at, and I'll let previous planning commissioners look at this, item 6 and the wording of it. I think Phil made a good point in that I thought the same thing. I had a question, what are we trying to say here?
But the second sentence does say cars. I'm with Inga. Not as a former planner. We didn't coerce her, but the way I read it was a car shall park in a parking place. But what they're talking about is here a designated drop-off zone.
Well, and I was wondering if staff is trying to...
But if it means put the word only in there, okay, put the word only in there.
And I think the staff may also have been trying to address the thing of someone's driving through the aisles, stops, kids jump out, meanwhile cars behind are backed up. doors closed and car goes on, that shouldn't be allowed either. That's a nuisance. So, but I don't know if
I
this
think we
is
heard that
addressing-
happens in Novato and all, and it happens at every
It's gonna happen.
school we have in town.
It's going to happen.
Okay. Well,
But
that's
I
fine.
think that's something we monitor. And
Yeah.
if it becomes a problem situation, we can address it. I would agree with my colleagues in terms of the changes, along with the clarification that the drop-off will be permitted in the rear under whatever terminology fits that occasion.
So you want to
So-
amend 6 a little bit of that?
But if we added the only to it, then it clearly stipulates that it's parking only, and it doesn't address the pickup or drop-off non-parking, which is just stopping generally, I think is how the police term it.
That's fine.
Okay. Did you have other further comments?
No, I think the 3-year is fair. You know, I don't want to put the applicant through a lot of trauma again in a short period of time, but it is an unusual situation. We've had them before, and I think it bears a review in due time. And should this site still be acceptable to them, and they still, can utilize the space. So I'd like to keep a 3-year look-see in this.
Okay. Well, I would just like to thank the applicant for coming out and appealing this, because not many applicants generally do that and appeal a planning commission, figuring that they're not going to get it anyway. I think this is certainly something that our community would like to have. I see these kids, I've got 3 of my own kids, and yes, they're very active, but I'm still trying to get them to go off to the gym. And of course, standard gyms, if they're under 14, they can't go to the gym by themselves. And, in fact, they've got to be accompanied usually by an adult, and I don't want to stand around and watch them lift weights, to tell you the truth.
Might be Arnold that way.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to meet Arnold that way. I'm certainly not sure of that. So I would applaud you in bringing this forward and questioning this. I also support the 3-year sunset clause, because I'm really curious to see. We've got the Grand Boulevard visioning piece that's coming along. We've got Salvatore's, which is transit-oriented development. I think that we're going to see some changes, and hopefully in that block it will get or require some additional pedestrian traffic that might be make it more conducive to retail uses in the future. But for right now, I think the point's been made, which is a good one, which is, something in there where it's going to be bringing people downtown or bringing people into that area, allowing them to have 45 minutes or an hour to, shop or window shop downtown is probably not a bad thing. I think, would we all like retail with sales tax revenue? Absolutely. There's no question about it. But it may not be in the cards for the next 3 years, and I think this will be fine. I would actually like to suggest one other additional modification to the draft conditional use permit that's been proposed. I was noticing in the applicant's addendum to the application, she stated that she's looking at having sort of quarterly nutritional seminars. And what I'd like to do is just modify item number 4, which outlines the maximum occupancy of the group instructional classes, to have that include any on-site seminars as well. Because again, I think we need to be sensitive.
Limited to 12?
Limited to 12. So that's covered
So
as
instructional classes and/or
and/or seminars.
Okay.
And then, is that okay with the applicant? Okay. Yeah, I figured you get too big and it's going to be hard to control those kids with all that energy anyway. All right. Well, Bob, do you need to tell us what language you need to put in a sunset clause of 3 years, or staff can handle that? Okay.
Why don't I make the motion?
All right. So go ahead and make the motion, Mike, if you'd like to.
I'd like to make a motion, Madam Mayor, that the council
Approve the conditional
do
use?
not uphold the decision of the Planning Commission in denying the conditional use permit for the subject property, based upon the findings that, number A, that the proposed use and location is not detrimental or injurious to the public health, peace, morals, and safety.
I'm sorry. You know what?
Just
Go
to
ahead,
clarify,
Bob.
this is a hearing de novo, so the effect of approving the use permit will be to
Yes, so we're
uphold the
approving
appeal. So if you
the use
just,
permit.
just characterize it as if it's a use permit before you de novo and just approve the use permit.
Based
All
on the
right.
two findings of the
Based on the
staff.
two findings and with the following modifications, striking condition 3, adding the use of the term seminars in condition 4, inserting the term only in item 6 after the word pickup only.
Okay, there's been a motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Davids got the second right in before Matt. So, Christine?
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Councilmember Davids? Yes. Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Teagle Doherty?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Good luck to you. And moving right along with the agenda, in our interest of keeping this meeting short, we do have yet another public comment period for anyone who wishes to speak to this on any item not on the posted agenda. Each speaker would be limited to 2 minutes. Is there any member of the public here wishing to speak? Okay. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.